Joseph Pike was slightly older than myself. He was a fairly weak boy, but outwardly he didn't look sick, or he was just a fairly weak lad. We were in the dining room in the monastery having our 4 o'clock bread and dripping. And Joseph Pike didn't eat his bread and dripping, and the brother started to lay into him with a strap, where Joseph Pike fell onto the floor and the brother laid in there with his boots. Next time I saw Joseph Pike was 3 days later, laid out in the church in the monastery, when we were told that he had died from other circumstances. Joseph Pike never left my mind from the day I saw him going into that hole. And when I came back from England 23 years later, I went to Rath Cemetery. This man came to me, and he was the caretaker of the graveyard, and I said, I'm looking for a grave. I said, would you mind asking me? I said, no, I'm looking for Joseph Pike. And he said, you're actually at his grave. And I just broke down totally, because there was a big old mound with just weeds, not a memory, nothing. And just over the way, big cross to the Christian Brothers. And I suppose whatever hit me that day made me so angry, you know, because I thought, this really can't be right. So I said to your man, look, I'm going to have to do something with this grave. I said, I can't leave it like that. I can see him now. You know, in my mind's eye, I could draw Joseph Pike. You know, I could see that smile, but I could also see the boots going in.
The Christian Brothers admitted that Joseph Pike had received a beating from one of the brothers, but denied that it contributed to his death.
I keep that grave clean. I go there at least once a fortnight at least, but I haven't been able to go for about a month. So the little lamp that I have inside in the middle of the graveyard would have been gone out. And somebody went in and replaced the batteries. Somebody put a toy, and there's a beautiful poem somebody wrote, put it into glass and put it at the grave. So they're remembered. And I think it helps people down there. You know, it helps people to think that all is not forgotten.
School, I wasn't into school. I'd be on the Mitch. You knew you were going to court. And then the judge said, I'll put you into RTE. And I remember going up this big lane in the car. And next thing, I came to this building. And I could see all these boys looking out through bars. And they were looking at me arriving.
Tom Sweeney spent over 4 years in 2 industrial schools, RTE in Dublin and Salt Hill in Galway. He was physically abused in both places and sexually abused in Salt Hill.
The decision of the DPP to take 5 Christian Brothers to court follows what's been described as a long and protracted Garda investigation.
It just came up on the television that industrial school in Galway, Salt Hill, that there was brothers being charged for abusing children.
A special Garda unit was established at...
So I got through to the people that was investigating. So they sent the guard up from Harcourt Street. Nice fella, he was sitting here. So I gave him the story. So your man said, you should see a solicitor about this case, he said, because some of these people are still alive.
In 1996, Tom began a High Court action against the Christian Brothers and the state. 6 years into the case, the Residential Institutions Redress Board was established. Instead of going to court, survivors were encouraged to apply to the board for compensation. Tom made a written application and the board made an offer.
I was offered €113,339, which I refused because I said I wanted to go to tell my story.
If survivors weren't happy with their offer, they could refuse it and go to a full hearing at the redress board. After Tom's hearing, the board reduced his offer by €40,000.
In the redress board, when I went back, I didn't know that I was going to be punished for what I said.
Mr Sweeney took his campaign to the gates of Leinster House to protest at his treatment by the redress board.
He was physically abused in RTE and in Galway.
I went on the hunger strike. It was very hard. It's the hardest thing you could do. Because I remember the superintendent came out of the gates. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm on hunger strike. Yeah. Oh, he said, are you? He said, well, I'll tell you now, son. He said, you'll only last a day. I said, why is that? But he said, come 10 o'clock tonight. He said, this road is cold, it's windy. He said, and you won't last. I said, go away.
Well, there's going to be further showers overnight, some of these heavy.
Well, it did come 10 o'clock, and my gosh, it was cold, it was freezing. But something in my mind just said, no, just keep going.
And perhaps a touch of ground frost in some sheltered inn.
My man came down and joined me, and he said, I'm not leaving on your own day. He said, I'm going to sit with you. So we sat there.
To discuss an issue of urgent public importance, namely the deteriorating condition of Mr Tom Sweeney, who has been...
I was trying to say to the people what you are doing is wrong. I said, they're throwing money at people, but they don't want to know our stories.
The government was under pressure in the Dáil today to meet Tom Sweeney, a 57-year-old man who's been on hunger...
22 days on hunger strike.
The time now is midnight.
He's exceptionally ill. He's exceptionally convinced of the right...
There was a letter sent out by the Minister of Education to say that if you come off the hunger strike, we let you go to the High Court.
22 days after his protest began, Tom Sweeney came off his hunger strike just after 4 o'clock this afternoon.
The government have offered me a fair and sympathetic hearing in the High Court. I have accepted the offer and I am now off the hunger strike.
By the Education Minister today, Noel Dempsey, to allow his case to return to the High Court.
I came off the hunger strike because I believed in what people were saying.
Much where people were seriously worried about Tom Sweeney's health.
But I didn't get to the High Court, unfortunately.
It was settled out of court.
Settled out of court, yeah. I think the government said in a letter, we'll give you the 114,000 provided you take the Christian Brothers separately to the court.
Before the case got to court, the Christian Brothers made an offer to Tom of €37,000.
Well, I said, look, I'm not taking this unless I get an apology. I wanted the apology, I said. And then I said, I'll accept it.
In the end, Tom got a written apology and €37,000 from the Christian Brothers, along with €113,000 from the state.
The only way you fight them is doing what I done was go on hunger strike. And that's partially the only way you get people to take notice. If I would have been able to read and write, I would have understood a lot better. But no, it's all down to education at the end of the day. Education. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's life, you know. Yeah, that's life. But there's nothing you can do about it.
The Redress Board was set up in 2002 to compensate survivors of institutional abuse. It ran in parallel with the Commission to Inquire into Child Abuse, which was set up to investigate industrial schools. Like Tom Sweeney, many survivors were taking court cases against religious orders and the state when the Redress Board was established.
I was taking a civil case against those who had abused me, and I was at least 4 years in it.
Sharon Murphy spent 15 years in St. Joseph's Industrial School in Clifton, which was run by the Sisters of Mercy.
My solicitor had asked if I would rather go through the redress, so I decided I would go instead of pursuing the civil case. I just got a call from my solicitor and she said, look, you have an appointment with them. I went up Myself and my partner Bernie, we went into a room. We waited for the solicitor to come back in, and she says, well, this is what they have offered, yay or nay. And I said, yay, and that was it. I was happy with it, yeah, I was.
Unlike Sharon, some survivors asked for or were called to a hearing by the Redress Board, where they told their stories in person. Redress was intended as a non-adversarial alternative to court, but that wasn't the case for many.
I went to the redress and I had a full hearing. You had the church's representative, you had the solicitor and a barrister, and then you had the judge and a psychiatrist. It was adversarial and you felt like you were on your own.
Mary Lodato spent 13 months in Hyde Park in Dublin as a child, where she suffered physical abuse. She was also sexually abused by a layperson not attached to the industrial school.
The redress system, the whole experience was brutal. It was demeaning. It was abusive all over again.
In return for their contribution to the redress scheme, the congregation sought and were given last-minute amendments to the redress bill by the government. Congregations would now have the right to reply to and crucially cross-examine survivors at hearings with the board's consent. These amendments had a profound impact on survivors and changed the very nature of redress. In Mary Lodato's case, the Sisters of Our Lady of Charity used their right of reply to deny all her allegations of abuse and neglect.
The church had said that it was a fantasy what had happened to me, that I was sexually abused in that institution, and I had to relive it. So in a way, having to relive it, it's a bit like, you know, you're put on an operating table and you are cut open and you're left there to fester. I felt this feeling of, oh my God, why are we doing this again to people? As I left, I couldn't wait to get out of the building, get to the airport. And when I got to the UK, my son and my husband were waiting for me, and they said, Mum, you look like you've been through 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. And I had a nervous breakdown. I couldn't speak, I couldn't do anything. The pain was just horrendous.
Another last-minute amendment to the redress bill was made to ease concerns the religious orders and some TDs had raised in relation to the constitutional rights of alleged abusers in a no-fault redress scheme. A gagging order banned survivors from naming perpetrators and institutions, or from revealing how much compensation they got under penalty of a fine or even jail.
I received €53,000. I know I signed an indemnity, right, but I felt that that was wrong. How did this come about that the church and state actually produce a system that is abusive all over again? How did that happen?
When they offered redress, yeah, a lot of people would have said, yes, that's to shut us up. And especially when they were told when they went into the redress, you can't say what you got. What was that saying to people? That was saying, you have to shut up. You're not allowed to. We'll take you to court if you open your mouth. That's not saying to a survivor of abuse, I believe you. That's saying to a survivor of abuse, get lost.
The gagging order effectively silenced survivors of institutional abuse once again. And if we think back to their experience as children, many of them wanted to disclose their abuse, but they were told under no circumstances were they to do that, or certain awful things would happen to them. And anything that approximates silencing now, as adults, is likely to make them feel similar emotions to those that they experienced back when they were children.
The impact of the gagging order on survivors seems to have been absolutely enormous. The law says you can't speak about your application or award from the redress board in a way that identifies anyone. Many survivors seem to have taken it in a far broader way. Survivors often have felt they can't even speak to the police. Now, that gagging order doesn't say you cannot speak to the police or you can never speak about what happened to you. And if a state does something that makes people feel they can't speak, that is a very real interference with their right to freedom of expression.
More than 15,500 survivors got money from the redress board. 1/3 of them lived in the UK. The average award was €62,250.
To me, it was a pittance. We just feel, yeah, okay, they gave us a couple of quid. But no, I still feel the same. The attitude was, well, you didn't do too bad. You got on with your life and you worked for yourself and you felt like you were penalised because you had, you know, stood on your own 2 feet and gone on with your life. And you made something of yourself.
Phyllis Morgan spent 15 years in institutions in Dublin. She later worked with survivor groups in London.
Some survivors received the cheque through the post and they would come into my office and they would just throw the cheque on my desk and say, look at that, Phil, dirty money, hush money, that's all that is, that's to shut us all up, you know. And it would be gone. They blow it, yeah. Especially if they were sexually abused. I noticed, if they'd been sexually abused, they called it dirty money. Yeah.
When John Pryor applied to the redress board for compensation, the Christian Brothers asked for permission to cross-examine him at a hearing. The redress board consented.
I had 2 days inside the redress board of non-stop attack. It just nearly destroyed me. Now they had to stop it on numerous occasions because I was just in bits.
The Christian Brothers forcefully denied all John's allegations. The order presented evidence in defence of each of the alleged abusers, but none of them were put on the stand. The brothers rejected John's rape allegation and how he was treated by the nurse afterwards as baseless fabrications.
It took me back into a place like I was behind 4 walls again, and here were the brothers and like a battering ram at me, and I had nothing I could do about it. The state gave them full permission that they could say and do whatever they liked. I was in such a bad place for a long time. I mean, I had 2 days in Dublin when I was being watched because I physically just didn't know where to turn. They absolutely ripped me asunder.
If I go to the redress board and I'm not believed, this reminds me of what it was like to be a child in an institution, of there being no way out, and possibly of beginning to believe again. I am worthless. I am shameful. I don't deserve to live. Maybe it would be better if I were dead. And it may have been that inadvertently, the way the redress board was set up, it had the potential to trigger that in survivors who had experienced extreme abuse as children.
After his hearing, John received a financial award from the redress board.
I think that the redress board started out with good intentions to compensate people for what happened to them. But I think where they lost their way